The India-Pakistan War Story. The air was thick with tension in the summer of 1947. India, a land of ancient kingdoms, was about to experience a historic moment, its independence from British rule. But the joy of freedom was shadowed by a storm brewing on the horizon. The British had hastily drawn a line, a border that would divide the subcontinent into two nations, India and Pakistan. But that line was more than just a mark on a map. It was a scar. Millions of people were forced to leave their homes overnight. Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs who had lived side by side for centuries were suddenly labeled as outsiders in their own lands. Trains carrying refugees were attacked, villages were burned, and rivers flowed with the blood of the innocent. Families were torn apart, friends became enemies, and the world watched as the two newborn nations stumbled into chaos. But the worst was yet to come. As India and Pakistan gained their independence, a new conflict was brewing over a paradise in the mountains, Kashmir. This beautiful, snow-capped region became the first battlefield between the two nations. And it wasn't just about land. It was about identity, faith, and survival. In October 1947, tribal militias from Pakistan stormed into Kashmir, claiming to protect the Muslim population. But the Maharaja of Kashmir, a Hindu ruler of a Muslim-majority region, decided to turn to India for help. In exchange for military support, he signed the Instrument of Accession, making Kashmir a part of India. But Pakistan refused to accept it. And so, the first war between India and Pakistan erupted. The mountains of Kashmir echoed with the sound of gunfire. Young soldiers marched through the freezing terrain, fighting for a land they had never seen before. The valleys turned red with blood, and the world held its breath. India and Pakistan were not just fighting for a piece of land, they were fighting for their souls. The winter of 1948 was brutal in Kashmir. Snow covered the mountains, but the fighting never stopped. Both Indian and Pakistani forces were locked in a deadly struggle, each determined to control the region. Villages were destroyed, and civilians were caught in the crossfire. Starvation, disease, and death became part of daily life for the people of Kashmir. But as the war raged on, another battle was being fought, this one in the halls of the United Nations. India went to the UN, accusing Pakistan of aggression, while Pakistan claimed it was simply protecting the rights of Kashmir's Muslims. The world powers watched, debated, and finally intervened. A ceasefire was declared on January 1st, 1949, and a line of control, LOC, was drawn, dividing Kashmir between India and Pakistan. But the ceasefire didn't bring peace. It only froze the conflict. Kashmir was divided, but both nations claimed it entirely. Families remained separated, and soldiers continued to guard the frozen peaks, their fingers on the triggers, waiting for the next order. Yet, even as the guns fell silent, a new war was beginning, a war of propaganda, politics, and betrayal. Both India and Pakistan began building their armies, fortifying their positions, and preparing for the inevitable next battle, and it wouldn't be long before the fire of war would ignite again. In 1965, the world once again turned its eyes to South Asia. This time, the conflict wasn't just limited to Kashmir. It spread like wildfire across the borders. Pakistan launched Operation Gibraltar, sending troops into Indian-administered Kashmir, hoping to incite a rebellion against Indian rule. But the plan backfired. India retaliated with full force, and the two nations plunged into a full-scale war. Tanks rolled across the deserts of Rajasthan, fighter jets roared in the skies, and soldiers clashed in the jungles of Punjab. Cities like Lahore and Amritsar became battlegrounds, and civilians lived in constant fear of air raids. For 17 days, the world watched as two young nations, still healing from the wounds of partition, tried to tear each other apart. But the cost was too high. Thousands of soldiers lost their lives, and the economy of both countries was shattered. Finally, under international pressure, a ceasefire was declared, and the Tashkent Agreement was signed in 1966. But the bitterness between India and Pakistan only deepened. Both nations began a race to build their military strength. Weapons were stockpiled, alliances were forged, and the shadow of another war loomed over the subcontinent. The story of India and Pakistan was far from over. In 1971, the world witnessed the bloodiest chapter in the history of India-Pakistan relations. This time, it wasn't just a border conflict. It was a fight for the soul of a nation, Bangladesh. East Pakistan, separated from West Pakistan by over 1,000 miles of Indian territory, erupted in a rebellion against the oppressive rule of the West. The people of East Pakistan, demanding independence, were met with brutal force. Villages were burned, intellectuals were killed, and millions fled to India as refugees. India, overwhelmed by the refugee crisis and moved by the suffering of the Bengali people, decided to intervene. In December 1971, Indian forces launched a full-scale invasion of East Pakistan. Within 2 weeks, the Pakistani forces surrendered, and Bangladesh was born. But the war left scars that would never heal. India and Pakistan had once again tried to destroy each other. And while a new nation was born, the hatred between the two old rivals only grew stronger. Decades have passed since the wars between India and Pakistan began, but the conflict is far from over. The line of control in Kashmir remains one of the most heavily militarized borders in the world. Soldiers stand guard with fingers on the triggers, while families on both sides continue to live in fear. But beyond the guns and the barbed wire, there is another story. A story of shared history, common culture, and deep human connections. Families separated by a border still speak the same languages, sing the same songs, and dream of peace. Yet, the shadow of conflict continues to haunt them. Even today, a single gunshot along the border can trigger a new wave of violence. And while politicians talk of peace, the people live in the constant fear of another war. The story of India and Pakistan is not just a tale of war. It is a story of two brothers who lost each other and who continue to search for a way back to each other. And as long as the mountains of Kashmir stand tall, the story of India and Pakistan will never truly end. The story of India and Pakistan is a reminder of how history can shape the fate of nations. It teaches us that conflict may begin with borders, but it thrives in hatred and misunderstanding. The scars of war run deep, but the hope for peace is never truly lost. As you've seen, even the darkest conflicts carry stories of courage, sacrifice, and survival. And perhaps the greatest lesson is this: true strength is not in weapons or armies, but in understanding, empathy, and the courage to forgive. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Uncle Luke Tells.